Hello again. Welcome to Satan's Trilogy. This is Book 3, Chapter 3, Reading 82. I am the author and the narrator. Sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. AC Lanes was only 18 minutes down the road, and the girls were excited to arrive. Everyone wanted to do some bowling and enjoy the complimentary meal of hamburgers and fries. AC Lanes was known for their garlic buns on burgers with seasoned garlic fries. For a Thursday, the bowling alley was fairly busy. About half of the lanes were in use by the public. 11 lanes had been roped off by the management for the girls from Grant High School. The girls found another banner at the end of the lanes above the pins. It said, "Welcome, 6th hour Grant High School runners." 3 cameramen from different networks were filming them as they enjoyed themselves. 6 girls per lane, and the girls were going crazy, laughing and giggling, and everyone watched as the bowling balls, more often than not, rolled down the gutter. It quickly became apparent that out of 60 girls, not one was a good bowler. Even Esther laughed at herself as the ball rolled off to the side, falling into the gutter before reaching the pins. 6 waitresses readily brought out everyone's order of hamburgers and fries. The girls were given an empty cup to fill with ice and a beverage of their choice just inside of the snack bar. The hamburgers were wonderful, as nearly everyone had expected, and the steak fries had a seasoning on them to die for. By the end of the last frame, everyone was well fed, full of joy, and a bit tired. The film crews had taken to a few of the girls, then left the building. Once the girls had returned to the bus, 2 of the cameramen filmed the bus as it left the bowling alley. Perhaps this was meant as the end of their broadcast should it make the news. Esther and Day returned to Esther's apartment in the Escalade and searched out Aunt Brandy. She had already fallen asleep and was breathing heavy. As they left Aunt Brandy's room, Day opened her mouth and released a huge yawn. "Oh my gosh, excuse me, Esther," Day said as she held her hand to her mouth. "I am really tired. It's been a long, wonderful day. I know that you have a lot to do yet, but if you don't mind, I need to sleep." "Of course not, Day," said Esther. "I'll join you after I do a few things." Esther gave Day a hug. "Love you, Day. Have sweet dreams." Day went to the bedroom and quickly dressed for bed, and then fell asleep under the sheets. Esther followed her usual routine and spent a few minutes on the internet. She then did her hour-long exercise. After finishing her evening's workout, Esther looked in on Day and found her breathing heavily in a deep sleep. Esther went to the bathroom to take a quick shower. First, she sat on the toilet, and as she emptied her kidneys, Esther thought about her childhood and how most of her life she would simply squat somewhere out of sight. Toilets really are better, thought Esther. Having removed her clothes, Esther placed her hands on the counter of the sink and leaned forward into the mirror. She studied her face and then spoke to herself. Why do I look so young while I feel so old? She asked herself. She continued to stare at herself for a few moments and then turned to look at her back. The dragon looked happy tonight, and Esther was pleased with this. Esther laughed at herself. My dragon always looks the same, she told herself. Esther chuckled at herself for thinking the dragon looked happy. Stepping into the large shower, Esther thought to herself, Amy does such a nice backwash. Esther then allowed her mind to drift just a bit. Day does a really nice backwash too, she thought. So Esther did the next best thing and turned on the side jets of water in her shower. She was being hit by water in more directions than a car in an automatic car wash. A few minutes later, Esther turned off the water and stepped out of the shower, placing a large towel around her. Then started to dry her hair with a blow dryer she had placed on the counter earlier. The warm air from the dryer relaxed Esther. It reminded her of the warmth of a campfire, with a breeze coming across it. Esther had many moments that she could recall that gave her the sense of comfort. This was her favorite. Careful not to overly dry her hair, she allowed the towel to drop to the floor as she moved the dryer to her breasts, her armpits, and her legs. A few minutes later, she lowered the temperature of the dryer and pointed it into her face. She enjoyed the breeze as her long hair fluttered in the wind. Turning off the hair dryer, Esther quickly put on some pale yellow silk pajamas. These reminded Esther of China and clothes that she often wore for bedtime as a child. Glancing up to the right of the door, a small light was blinking. A light had been installed several weeks earlier by Esther's friend John. It indicated that someone was at the front door. Walking out to the front room, Esther went to the door and checked the hallway monitor to see who it was. It appeared to be her friend John. Esther had checked the peephole in the center of the door, and indeed it was her friend John. Opening the door, Esther greeted John. Hi, John. It's a bit late, isn't it? Come on in. Dressed in a black suit and an open blue cotton shirt, John looked about the same as the last time Esther saw him, minus the tie. Hey, John, where's your tie? Asked Esther, slightly joking. Esther knew John had a good reason for coming to her apartment at such a late hour, but she couldn't help ribbing him. John looked beat and replied, I took the tie off over 6 hours ago. Esther, I have a real crisis, and I need your help. Esther became serious and asked John what he needed. We spent the entire morning following up on some information given to us by an anonymous source. John paused, took a breath, and continued. We were told that terrorists had built a dirty nuclear bomb and were ready to use it. John paused and said, We found them, and it looks like they have a bomb. Esther, my people are good, but you are better. There are 6 people that must be subdued before one of them detonates the bomb. I think with your skills, you are my best choice. John grabbed Esther's arm and said, I don't want to risk this bomb going off in Chicago. Esther quickly asked, Do Do you have a plan? They are in a house about 12 minutes from here. We are going to create a blackout for the entire east side because you can maneuver so well in the dark. I want you inside taking them out quickly. John then added, there is a risk that one of them will activate the bomb before you stop them. If that happens, you might have to disarm it. John knew that Esther had some knowledge of nuclear bombs of this type, which made her even a better choice for this job. John paused, then added something he was uncomfortable with. Esther, they killed the family that lived in the house. We have a deep gamma ray viewer on the house. Their bodies are in the back bedroom. 3 children and the parents. John tried to clear his throat. He had choked up at the thought of these men killing an entire family. Trying to regain his composure, John continued, my team can tell us exactly where the 6 men are in the house when we get there. Esther quickly walked to the spare bedroom and John followed her. Walking to the back side wall on the right, Esther pivoted a picture frame and placed her left hand on a glass screen, flush with the wall. A red line scanned her palm, and a second later the wall popped open, displaying a small assortment of weapons. Esther grabbed some black clothes, slacks, and a long-sleeve blouse. She then grabbed a belt that held a dozen throwing knives. Closing the door, Esther headed for the bathroom to change. Within 1 minute, Esther emerged wearing the black clothes and the belt full of knives. Let's go, said Esther as she quickly walked to the front door. Oh, wait, said Esther. She went to the kitchen and wrote on a notepad, Day, I will be back in 60 minutes. Love you, Esther. Leaving the note on the kitchen counter where it could be seen should Day awaken before she returns, Esther now was focused on her task. Let's get an update from my people, said John as he walked to the van. The side door opened and they quickly went inside. 2 walls of high-tech equipment and 2 people monitoring it. What is the status? Said John. A thin young man, maybe 23 years of age, spoke first. Looks like one of the family may still be alive. We fine-tuned the camera and found a slight heartbeat in the bedroom. We think their 18-year-old daughter is being raped. Her position is slightly elevated above the bodies we see. The man turned to a monitor and focused on the screen. They have either drugged her or beat her. Either way, her heartbeat is very low, he said as he turned back to John. John turned to Esther. The street map is over here. Esther studied it, glanced back at the monitor of the house and said, wait 6 minutes and turn the power off. Leave the power off for 12 minutes. Then have the power turned on and meet me at the front door. John said, you got it. Esther headed for the van door and paused. Turning to John, she asked, what is the girl's name? John turned to the other 2 in the van. A young woman responded, her name is Rita. Esther opened the van door and was gone. John jumped into action and said, start the clock. Alert the power companies in a 6-minute countdown. Esther walked down the street. The night was cold and damp. She knew her attack would not last but a few moments, and all would be dead. Rape was a crime that Esther couldn't forgive, and killing innocent people to accomplish a goal just seemed insane. Esther's biggest focus was on getting the young girl out of the house. She didn't consider the bomb an issue. Exactly 6 minutes later, the block went dark. All of the lights on the street were out. The 6 terrorists ran about the house, then to the front door to peer out at the street. "It is only a blackout. It happens all the time in Chicago," said one of the men. "The power will come back on eventually." The 6 men stood looking out the front door and the window alongside it. They were thinking that they should be watching their backs. Esther had already gained entry into the house and was standing behind them. She waited for someone to notice her, or for the lights to come back on. The men stayed at the front of the house, peering out into the street. One of the men finally turned around, and Esther sent a knife into his neck. And as they all turned around, Esther released more knives from her belt, striking each man in the head within seconds. They dropped to the floor like bags of cement, quickly and hard. Esther walked down the hallway. It reminded her of the home Bushra lived in before Esther rescued her from terrorists. Esther reached the entrance to the room on the right and saw a young girl tied to the bed. Her arms and legs were tied to each corner of the bed, respectively. The girl was alert, with a cloth gag tied across her mouth and behind her head. Esther went to her and softly spoke. "The men are all dead. You are safe." Esther cut the ropes away from her legs as she continued to reassure the girl. Repeating herself, Esther said, "Rita, the men are all dead." Removing the gag from the young girl's mouth, Esther tried to comfort her as she cut the ropes around her wrist. The young girl grabbed Esther and held tight. Esther sensed that Rita had been brave and was still strong. That is, as strong as an 18-year-old could be after having her family killed in front of her. Esther slowly pulled Rita slightly away and asked, "How many men were here? Did you count them?" Rita softly spoke, "I saw 6 men. They were all bad." Rita's eyes teared up. "They killed everyone but me. I knew if I held on, there was a chance that I would survive." Rita looked at Esther. "My family is dead." Esther held Rita for another moment close to her. The lights suddenly went back on. "Rita," said Esther, "I have a very good friend that asked me to come here tonight. His name is John. He will need to ask you some questions as they take you to a hospital to be checked." Esther smiled at Rita. "John will see that you are taken care of." Esther added, "I am going to ask John to call me when you are released. I think that you should come home with me, at least for a while." Esther looked about and saw some clothes that looked as if they would fit Rita. Pulling away from Rita, Esther collected the clothes off the floor and started to help Rita dress. As they walked to the front door, Rita asked, "How did you do this?" "I'm a soldier, and this is what I do sometimes to save people," said Esther as she held on to Rita as they approached the front door. They had to step over the 6 bodies of the men that had killed Rita's family. Staring at each man as she walked by their bodies, Rita said to Esther, "I don't understand why all of this had to happen." Esther opened the door, and immediately some floodlights were switched on, and Esther was in a spotlight as she held onto Rita's leaving the house. John yelled out, "Step down. We are good to go. Medics, get the young girl." Several men moved forward and took Rita from Esther, placing her on a now expanded medical cart. Rita looked at Esther. Reassuring Rita, Esther said, "These people will help you. I will see you soon. You will be fine." Esther gave Rita a huge, confident smile to reassure her as they wrapped her in a blanket on the cart and wheeled her towards an ambulance close by. John came up to Esther. "Can my people go in?" Esther smiled at John. "There are 6 dead men at the front door. They certainly didn't behave like professionals." John waved his bomb crew into the house. "Esther, why don't I drive you home? You have school tomorrow. And perhaps you'll still be able to get some sleep." Esther looked at John and said, "Rita will need a friend that understands what she went through. I want to see her tomorrow night, then have her stay with me for a while." John looked at Esther and nodded in agreement. "You know, Esther, Rita has gone through a lot." John looked at Esther. "Perhaps you are the only person that can keep her sane." I moved my car closer. It is just over here." John was walking with Esther, as he placed his arm around her shoulder. "You have a couple of big days ahead of you, Esther." John squeezed her arm as they walked. "If at all possible, I will be there Saturday, cheering for your class." John opened the car door and waited for Esther to sit, then closed the door. Once in the car, John added, "You don't know this, but I went to Grant High for 2 years before my parents moved, and I had to switch schools. So I am rooting for you girls. This is what the school needs, and the fact that the running team is all girls is fabulous." John walked Esther up to her door and turned to Esther with one final comment. "Adam was my closest friend. Know that he is very proud of the woman you have become." Giving Esther a kiss on the cheek, John said, "I'll text you as soon as possible on Rita's condition and location." John turned slightly as he walked away. "Good night, Esther." Esther entered the apartment, and Day was awake on the sofa, sipping a cup of coffee. She looked at Esther and smiled. I knew that you would be back, but I had a little trouble sleeping." Esther smiled at Day as she went to the couch and sat beside her. "Is this decaf?" Day said, "Yes. I knew we would want to sleep as soon as you returned. I didn't want caffeine keeping us awake." "Did you make extra?" asked Esther. "1 cup left in the pot," said Day. "Well then, why don't I enjoy that cup in the next 6 minutes while I tell you where I was," said Esther as she jumped up to retrieve the coffee. Back within seconds, Esther told Day how John needed her help and explained what the one survivor had endured. "Rita is our age. She needs someone to be a friend." Esther looked at Day, and with eyes that were pleading, "Day, I want you and me to be her friends." Day didn't hesitate. "There's no problem, Esther. If you feel we can make a difference, then I am all for it." Day paused a moment. "Your friend John wouldn't take you out of the house in the middle of the night to rescue someone. There is more to this story than you have told me, isn't there?" said Day. Esther smiled at Day, somewhat proud that her sister was so perceptive. "You're right, Dave, but I have given you all of the important details that John allows me to. I am sworn to follow the legalities required of anyone interacting with his department." Esther smiled at Day. "Besides, you know the most important facts. We can make a difference in Rita's future." Day was feeling really tired and decided to suggest going to bed. "I trust you, Esther. You know best. I think it is time for some sleep. The girls quickly went to the bedroom and fell asleep. And I'm going to stop there. Hope you enjoyed that. That was reading 82. So until next time, take care and be safe.